Welcome to episode 303 of the DFO Rundown, brought to you by Bet365, our sports betting partner, just in time for the 2024 playoffs. We'll be here with Bet365 to provide you all the news, analysis, lines, and betting options for the playoffs until one team is left standing. Still 8 remain. We'll see by next week which 4 are left. Go to bet365.com. Have a little fun. I'm Jason Greger. He is Frank Saravalli. And Frank, the second round and the storylines and the intrigue just continues to build some animosity as well. So there's lots to discuss. Let's start, I guess, with the Panthers and the Bruins. And, of course, the Bruins not happy about the allowed Sam Bennett goal. I've watched the replay, and I'm kind of – I don't really understand it. What do you make of it?
I don't have any issue with it.
Okay.
I know what the rule says, which allows for basically any player who makes contact, and that is the same as goalie interference. I know what the rule says and the rule book says is my point, but I watched that sequence and I don't think in any way the goaltender was impeded from making the save, which is really what it should come down to. Was there a reason why he couldn't have made the save? And when the answer is there is none,
well, that's what I mean.
Then I think it should stand as a good goal. Like at no point I think the overhead view to me is the key. At no point was the netminder unable to make the save.
Well, I think they look at him cross-checking Coyle, but he was already down in a position. I don't think he's going to be able to get back anyway. But so I understand why it counts. I understand why Bruins fans are emotional and everybody's upset over it. But yeah, I watched it many times, and when I said, I don't understand it. I said I didn't really understand the outrage. I guess I shouldn't say that. It's kind of dumb. I understand the outrageous playoffs. Every borderline play, people are freaking out. So, it's emotional time. But when I watched it, the overhead view, but also the one side camera, I don't know, I should probably find the name of the guy who was tweeting it out, but there was the one side angle showed that when Bennett gets the puck, Coyle still hasn't yet to touch Swayman, right? So maybe that's the timing factor in it too. And it's his own player. So unless you're going to call a penalty on Bennett, I don't see how you can reverse the call.
I'm with you. It's odd that we're in agreement, first off. But second, it's odd how vehement everyone is the other direction, because it seems like you and I are on an island.
Yeah. I get, to me, either you call a penalty, but by the rule book, you can't take that goal back because you missed a penalty on the play, right? And even then, guys push guys from behind battling for pucks all the time. So I don't know, I don't see how anybody realistically could say, okay, they're going to reverse this goal. There's no chance, right? I just didn't see. There's nothing in there to suggest that it was going to be a real goal. I mean, sorry, an overturned goal.
And that's, oddly enough, maybe not even the most controversial Sam Bennett sequence of the series.
No, definitely not. I found it interesting that angle didn't come out and tell the game. He clearly got a little pop in there. There's no question about it. But the fact that he's not suspended before the game, I'm assuming the NHL would have seen that angle, Frank. I know it didn't come out publicly before
100%.
Yeah. So
they have access to it for sure. But so the question is, why wasn't that released publicly sooner? Like, why did TNT wait until just before the game to show it? And I guess the next question is, obviously operating under the assumption that the NHL saw it, why wasn't that worthy of something additional? That's not a hit. That's a punch in the face. Am I missing something?
Yeah, it's a sneaky little one for sure. Yeah. I thought that play is definitely, I think Bruins fans have more reason to be upset over that play than they do the goal.
I'm with you. I think the hit on Marchand is way more significant to the outcome of the series than that.
Yes. Yeah.
And
And
does
obviously
this
he's not
also
getting.
mean
Go ahead.
I was going to say, does this also mean that this is the end of the road for the Bruins?
Yeah. I don't see them winning 3 straight. Now I know Florida did it last year. They won game 5 and game 7 on the road and game 6 at home. So, Boston faces the exact same scenario, but there's probably no Brad Marchand. They don't. I just think Florida's a deeper team, even with Brad Marchand. But without Brad Marchand in the lineup, Frank, that's just another major hole for the Bruins. I don't see how they're going to come back and win 3 straight.
I don't see it. I don't see the Bruins on a good day with everyone beating the Panthers 3 times in a row. I just don't see it. So
No.
to think that the Panthers only need 1 win, I mean, the Carolina Hurricanes are staring down the same thing.
Yep.
I don't see that either. Even
No.
as close as
Let's
those games have been, and the fact that Carolina needed that last minute magic to kind of to pull off the game 4 win, like that's and avoid the sweep, like that was something, but to think you're going to beat the Rangers 3 times in a row, I don't know. I think we've got an early preview of our Eastern Conference final is what it feels like. And I'm not really going out on a limb, but I don't know that we necessarily saw 2 short series. Did you?
well, I think I had Florida in 5, so I thought that would be short, but no, I thought the other one would be longer. Actually, I thought Carolina was going to win. I give New York a lot of credit, and let's stay in the East, and then we'll come West. But you look at that Carolina series, Frank, and it seems like a lot of similar things in the past for the Hurricanes. They outshoot you, but not necessarily out quality chance you, as the numbers would suggest from the series. And like, let's say they lose in 5 after losing in 4 to Florida. Like, what direction do they go? Like, how significant of a change do you think they need to make?
Oh, I think it's going to be a sea change moment. Like I don't think that this is going to be really all that different than what the Toronto Maple Leafs and the foundational questions that they're asking now. I just think the way that they deploy it is going to be different. I mean, think about how long this Canes core has been together. Um, they're a team that's had way more success than the current iteration of the Leafs. They've gotten to the conference final twice, 2019 and 2023, and it's been mostly the same players that have been part of it. When you get to that stage twice, and both times you get to the conference final, you get swept, and then you get knocked out in 5 in the second round. I mean, how many years in a row can we say the Carolina Hurricanes have one of the best decors in hockey and have nothing to show for it? Like, so that's the first thing that I think of is just think about the influx of change that's coming. And I think in some ways it kind of perfectly lines up for them to make changes, right? Like they have had a tremendous run from this core, and some of these pieces will obviously continue to be part of it. But the idea that you have Brady Shea, Brett Pesce, these guys hitting 30 years of age and them not re-signed long term, it lends itself, they're pending UFAs. It lends itself to just natural change. Like I think this was probably coming either way, with the results that they were going to be facing. I think the bigger questions are up front. The Kuznetsov trade clearly hasn't worked. He has another year left. Teuvo Teravainen is also a free agent. What do you do with Jake Gensel? What do you do with a core leadership piece in Jordan Martinook? There's tons of room for change, but the one thing that I don't see, regardless of whether he's signed to an extension right at this exact present moment or not, is the coach. You know, talking on Toronto radio this morning, one of the first things they want to know is, hey, what's the status of Rod Brind'Amour? Is there any chance he could be part of the Leafs head coaching search? And the answer is no, zero. I can't put too fine a point on this because, I think you always have to allow for some possibility that something goes sideways, but Rod Brind'Amour, I don't think is coaching anywhere except for the Carolina Hurricanes. Period. End of story. And contractual issues, notwithstanding, they've made it clear Rod Brind'Amour will be a coach in Carolina for as long as he wants to be.
Yeah, I can understand why Toronto would be interested, no question. But I would think Rod would stay there. He's pretty ingrained in the community outside of the coaching stuff. You look at their defense. I just think they're going to have to change, how they deploy their forwards. I think they need to add a little bit different dimensions in their group. They got a lot of the same guys who have different last names, but have a very similar style. I think that they could use some sandpaper mixed in with some of their guys, and hard to find. Don't get me wrong, but
I don't know that I agree, because I think they do have enough of an edge with some of the guys that they have in their lineup. Like Jordan Stahl plays that way. He is difficult to play against, and he's a Selke finalist this year. I think you have to be careful and maybe you perhaps need to define what you're saying a little bit better. But I think the reason why they've been so successful these last 7 years has been because they actually do go out and get and identify players that fit within what they want to accomplish. That identity of finding fits is part of what has made the Carolina Hurricanes arguably the most consistent team in the NHL in this period of time. So
in the regular season.
Yeah, but they've also, like, again, getting to do 2 conference finals, that also makes them one of the most successful playoff teams. Like, they've probably won more playoff games than just about anyone over the last 6-7 years. So just because you don't break through doesn't mean that it's necessarily broken. I mean, ask the Caps, ask the St. Louis Blues, ask a bunch of other teams. Like, weird things happen. And I'm not saying that means you can do nothing. I guess what I'm saying is it's not necessarily that, or is it that their calculus and their scheme of what that identity looks like, does that need to be tweaked? I think the way that they go about it and their process is incredibly impressive.
I understand, they're a high shot volume team, but you look at this series, they don't get as many chances, and they don't. I don't know. To me, they have a lot of guys who are similar, and I don't know if they have a real power forward. Jordan Stahl is a great third line center. You're bang on that. He's a defensive minded guy, but he's got 3 goals in the last 3 playoff years for Carolina. He's not an offensive guy. There's nothing wrong with that. That's his role as a defensive guy. Okay, no problem. But when I look at Aho and I look at Jarvis and I look at Teravainen and I look at Natchez and I look at Kotkaniemi, and yes, obviously Aho and them are a little bit more skilled, but they don't have a power forward, right? Like, they don't have a Sam Bennett. They don't have a Kachuk. They don't have a Marchand, right? Like, they don't have that type of mix amongst their forward group, right? And to me, I just think that's something that's lacking. I find they have all very good players, but you have a lot of very good players who play similar. Like, Stahl's their third line center. He's a defensive guy. I wouldn't even necessarily include him, right? He's not an offensive, guy that much anymore in his career, which is fine, right? He's excellent defensively. But when I look at Carolina, and I don't know, I don't know if at the key time, can they score the ugly, dirty goal, right? Can they score just that grind it out, look at Sam Bennett, little cheap, sure, right? Well plays, cross check, boom, scores, right? Like, I don't think they have that type of forward.
So, okay, I just, out of curiosity, I did end up looking it up. Who has the most playoff wins since 2018-19? Where do you think the Canes rank?
18. They might be second behind Tampa.
They're 5th. It's Tampa 1, Colorado 2, Vegas 3, Dallas 4, Carolina 5.
Right.
They are 37 and 35.
Yeah. Like, it's funny. The Islanders actually have a higher points percentage, like winning percentage, than the Carolina does. Now, they played 12 fewer games, but right, like that kind of illustrates it. No.
Yeah.
So
I think you're right. I think maybe some of their what goes into the equation, like what it spits out at the end of the day in terms of how they acquire and attack the players that they do, maybe that's what needs reimagining, not necessarily how they do it.
yeah, yeah, it's fair. Like they're very they don't have to blow things up per se, but you tweak things here and there. It's like you mentioned their blue line, right? Like they just don't have the finances to bring them all back, right? So Brady Shea, Brett Pesce, like I actually think they miss Brett Pesce a lot on their penalty kill, especially going up against the Rangers in the series. I don't think we can overlook that. I think it's a significant, valid concern for them this postseason. And maybe it's bad luck too. They're going up against a team like Carolina was basically the best combined power play penalty kill in the league, Frank. But come playoff time, like you look at those numbers and and I have it up here for Carolina's last years. Look what their power play is compared to the other teams ahead of them. They're 14.7% in their last 72 playoff games. Tampa Bay's 24, Colorado's 25.8, Dallas 23.5, the Bruins 29.7, right? Like New York 26.6, Edmonton in 40 plus games, 35%. Like come playoff time, for whatever reason, their power play does not show up and you need it. So maybe they got to get a power play. Maybe that's, it's not so much 5-on-5. It's maybe they got to get a power play specialist or tweak their power play because it's killing them in the playoffs.
Yeah, it can't all be won at even strength. Just like the Oilers are finding out, you can't win it all on the power play.
Yeah.
It has to be some mix of both. And by the way, maybe they're just smart in having Pesce and Shea walk to free agency. Like they're hitting 30 years old. Why commit long term to guys that are inevitably going to have the age curve drop off?
Yeah, it's a fair point, right? It's to me, if you can get a 3-year deal, it's term so much more than AAV that crushes teams at this time, right? So if you can convince a guy to get a decent term, now I understand why they want to go and get 8 years if a team's willing to do it. But if you're Carolina, I'm sure you might offer those guys 3-year deals, maybe a 4. Like 4 is not crazy, but I don't. You definitely
They're
don't
not.
want to go
Why?
term.
What's the incentive to sign that? If I were one of those guys, I'd be like, the minimum I'm taking is 6 years, and if you
Yeah.
don't want to come to
No,
the
I get
table,
it.
I'll find someone who will.
Well, I guess the incentive, Frank, is it all comes down to, do you want money or do you want to be on a competitive team? Like at some point you're making it like, none of these guys are going to sign for 2 or 3 million. Like they're going to get significant money. So, they've already made significant money. Like I don't think money's is the factor here. Right. But every player is different. All depends what you want.
They could also have the same exact argument that you and I are having right now. I've been here for 6 years.
Yeah,
I've been here for
sure.
7 years, and we've been competitive, but we haven't won. Maybe I can go to a place where I can get the money and term that I'm looking for and have a chance to win.
Yeah.
What you're looking
Valid.
for is a chance. Whoever's going to be in Carolina is going to have one. That's just the nature of having some of the pieces that they do, and Aho and that group. But they need more. They need different. They need something else.
Quick, do you think Jake Gensel resigns?
I do. I think he's been that good of a fit. I think they realize that he's been that good of a fit, and I think they should, again, think about exactly what I just said. He's one guy I'd make an exception for, turning 30 in October. I think you need difference makers, and I think he's clearly established both in the regular season and in the playoffs. Like he's a playoff monster. He's back to point per game this year. His numbers are off the charts as one of the best playoff performers of his age group. I'd want to have him.
Yeah, no, it's fair. What about Stefan Nosa? Never talked about him. The guy in their last 3 playoff years has 8 goals. in very limited minutes. Like if you're looking for a guy who shows up and scores, he has 8 goals the last 2 playoff years, Frank, for the Hurricanes. Only Seth Jarvis has more with 9. And he's playing like, this year he's only playing 9 minutes a night. And man, that guy is giving you a lot of great production in limited minutes for the Hurricanes. Now you mentioned the Oilers, so let's go there to Vancouver last night. The Oilers obviously outshoot them. Vancouver has a 3-1 lead after 20 minutes. And in the final 40 minutes, they had 4 shots, 5-on-5. One of them was inside 45 feet. They really kind of sat back, and Edmonton couldn't score. They couldn't beat Shilovs. Their power play actually in the third period had 2 chances, didn't score. But at some point, you got to score 5-on-5, and you could talk chances all day long. And yeah, they had some, but the big story is they didn't get any saves. Stuart Skinner allowed 4 goals on 15 shots. Now, hey, some of them fine, but to me, he's got to make at least one of those saves, at least one in that game, and he didn't make it. So the big question will be, who do they start in game 4 for the Edmonton Oilers?
I don't think you can go back to Skinner yet. I mean, here's the thing. Last year when he played, you thought he'd find it again, and Jay Woodcroft continued to go to him, and he never did. And I think the stats and history would suggest that right now he's cracking under pressure. I don't know any other way to put it. There's a lot of Mitch Marner vibes of consistent and strong regular season contributor playing in his hometown, trying to help his team win a Stanley Cup that just doesn't have the ability to do it. And so if you want to just look at this year's numbers, his series save percentage right now through 3 games is .793. His minus 5.7 expected goals against, meaning he's allowed 6 more goals than expected, is second worst only to Connor Hellebuck. And then if you want to pull out the frame a little bit and take a larger view, he's been the worst playoff performer of any salary cap era goaltender among guys who have played at least 15 games. He's also the worst Oilers postseason goalie ever. Like, we're talking about bad numbers. He has an .881 save percentage in 20 career playoff games. Like, we're no longer at the point where it's a small sample size. And there's a million things to break down with the Oilers. Their offensive depth is back to the point where it's non-existent again. They only have their top players going, and there's a reason why Sunday night McDavid and Draisaitl played 13 of the 20 minutes in the third period. So your depth isn't scoring. You don't have very much pushback. The fact that they watched Connor McDavid get cross-checked in the face after time expired is absolute insanity, and they did nothing. And, you pack all these things together. The fact that their power play has been lethal but isn't getting enough chances in this series, they might find some way. Like, this series isn't over yet. They might find some way to beat the Canucks, and I don't know who's going to be in goal to do it. But I think what's abundantly clear watching this team is they ain't beating anyone else after this. You're not beating Dallas or Colorado like this, playing like this. And that's really the most damning part of this. So, all that said, who do you start in game 4?
That's a great question. So you went back and you looked at Skinner, and last year, game 5 and game 6, and both of them he got pulled. I'm sure Chris Knobloch will take all that in consideration. They'll have a conversation. I wonder. Skinner's always being a guy who comes out if he has a bad game. He stands into the media. Last night, he opted not to, which makes me wonder. Is it just frustration? I get it's the playoffs and everything's amplified. There's no question about it. But I look at I might go with Pickard, to be honest. I know because here's the thing. You're not giving up very much. You don't need it's not like, like I look at Vancouver and they're like, man, Sheeloss is playing great and we need him to stand on his head at the amount of shots and chances we're giving up. The Oilers don't need that, right? They just need solid, consistent goaltending. So
That's why it was like once they put in Pickard, I was like, they could put in someone from the stands for the third period because they were going to have the puck so much that it wasn't going to matter.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I think I probably go Pickard, and I think that's the other really tough part about this Skinner conversation is he's getting the wheels beaten off of him by a guy who started this playoffs as Vancouver's third string guy that most hockey fans, 98% of them, had never even heard his name before. Like, this is a guy, like, how anonymous has Artur Shilov's been in his rise? The Canucks had him living in a team-owned condo near the rink. And he, at some point in the last week or 10 days, said to them, "Hey, guys, is there any chance you could help me out? I'm living here and I get woken up every day by the sun at 5:30 because there are no blackout blinds. Can someone help me get some blackout blinds in my condo here?" Like, this is a guy that is so far off the radar, not getting any much attention from anyone, yet when the Canucks need a save, they're getting it. When the Florida Panthers need a save, they're getting it. Just like, I know Leon Draisaitl made the quip or joke after Game 3 saying posts aren't good goaltending. And that's great if you want to make fun of him, but last time I checked, it's Shilovs who makes 3 saves in a sequence in the dying seconds of the second period. It's Shilovs who saved a shot from Draisaitl on the rush. And I'm not talking about the one that hit the post. Why is it that the Canucks can get solid stops and goaltending? It can't just all be, hey, there was a defensive breakdown. Hey, Nurse and Ceci made a mistake, but the puck ends up in the back of the net. Like, at some point, it's reasonable to expect a save from your goalie, and Skinner's not providing it.
No. And that's why I could see Pickard getting the start in Game 4. And, depending kind of how it goes, Chris Knobloch basically kind of outlined, and he's done it all year if you listen closely to Knobloch, that, I think he'll give Skinner a chance. He's a big believer in allowing guys redemption opportunities. So I don't think if Pickard, plays well in Game 4, like, he'd have to play great. I think if he just plays okay, I could see them even going back to Skinner. I wouldn't be shocked if they do that in Game 5 or maybe even Game 6, depending. But I'd be surprised if we didn't see Skinner again in the series, is probably what I'm saying. I think at some point, Chris Knobloch's being a big believer in giving guys opportunities again. Now, maybe this is different, right? Everything changes. I understand it, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see him again, but I think not in Game 4.
Last year, the conversation was, oh, well, he's a young guy. Oh, well, he could be our goalie of the future. All of these things. I just think at some point the team has to come first. This whole idea of we need to protect these guys. And I think the other part is I know what the regular season numbers were and how well Skinner played after the start of the year.
Yeah.
But I got to say, like, the Oilers trade deadline was not very good. You could say what you want about Henrique and his injury status so far these playoffs. I think it's a really underwhelming. They're underwhelming additions to your team, and you gave up a first round pick, and you have a night like last night where Carrick doesn't play. Why isn't Carrick playing?
He should play.
Why isn't he playing over Connor Brown
or Derek Ryan? I think, to me, if I'm Chris Knobloch, from what I've seen from my players through 3 games, I would, hopefully Henrique can play. Now, obviously it depends on health, but if Henrique's able to play, I'm playing him and Holloway both in my top 9, and I would have Corey Perry with Sam Carrick and Matthias Janmark as my 4th line. That's what I would do. And Knobloch's going to have to find a balance here. He admitted it after the game. He can't play his first line that much. Do they split up McDavid and Draisaitl? Draisaitl I thought was excellent last game, so he's proven time and time again he can carry his own line. That's something
he's been the Oilers' best player this series.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, by far. So I would, I'd strongly consider it to see that, or just challenge your second, third, and fourth lines. Like enough's enough. You can't. The only guy who has a goal is Dylan Holloway at 5-on-5, and that happened in Game 2 of the LA Kings. They don't have one goal from any player in their bottom 6 outside of those 2 goals. All playoffs. Ryan McLeod, Corey Perry, Warren Fogle has an empty net goal. Doesn't count 5-on-5, right? Derek Ryan, Yanmar, all of them. Like, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins 5-on-5. It's got to get going, right? So Evander Kane's got to do more. Like pretty much every forward, outside of their top line needs to be way better.
It's the same Oilers story of every playoffs past. Really. That's what it feels like.
Well, yeah, because goaltending. I actually thought Mike Smith was fine in 2022, but had some puck handling issues, but saves actually was fine. But I would agree with you. And last night, Edmonton, unfortunately, there's 2 giveaways that cost him the game. Derek Ryan on the penalty kill. He's a foot away from the blue line, doesn't get it out. They score later on. And then Warren Fogle. He has perfect possession. He's skating out of the zone and tries to make a little, pitcher perfect pass, turns it over, boom, back of the net, like within seconds. And you know what? Those plays just they come back to haunt you. Like Vancouver is not gifting the Oilers a lot of goals, right? They're just not. So they're making them earn their goals. And that's especially when you have a struggling goaltender. You can't have a struggling goaltender and then be giving up 2 goals in a game. You just can't do it.
Yeah, I think there also needs to be some credit given to Vancouver in their adjustment in Game 3. Think back to the last period of Game 2 where the Oilers absolutely dominated. They had similar zone time, but didn't have nearly as many good looks, and their pressure wasn't nearly as sustained because the Canucks were getting more kills of plays. They would find a way to break it up. Maybe they'd have an icing. Maybe they'd get the puck out, whatever it was. And instead of the Oilers, running through their lines and that same pressure being maintained, it really wasn't in Game 3. They were much better in their own end in the third period, even if they weren't as aggressive as they could have or should have been trying to play with the puck in Edmonton's end. That was almost non-existent. But they did a way better job of breaking up plays and breaking up the flow of what Edmonton was trying to do. And Rick Tocchet shouted out his assistant coaches, Adam Foote, Mike Yeo, the whole staff, that really spent a long time, he said, going over the video from Game 2 to make those adjustments.
Yeah. They flat out, like Edmonton, when you outshoot a team that much for the final 40 minutes, you got to find a way. And they just didn't find a way. They've been down 2-1 in a series before last year against LA. They won 3 straight. I don't think it's time to panic, but I do think that Knobloch's got a tough decision in net. Maybe it's not as tough as some of us think. And then he's just going to have to challenge his players. You need more from guys not named McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman. It's just a fact. So other teams get lots of guys producing. The Oilers had lots of guys producing in the regular season. So figure out how to do it. I don't care how you do it. Figure out how to do it. It's that simple. You can't just say, well, geez, we're trying and we're doing other things other than scoring. No, doesn't matter at this point. The other stuff, I don't care. Shot attempts in the playoffs are irrelevant. Goals are all that matters in short series because the sample size is not big enough. Ask any proper analytics guy and he'll tell you it's too small of a sample size to make anything about it. You got to have guys who bury their chances. And Edmonton, goalposts aside, sure, they got some chances. They didn't bury any of them. And if they do, they can get back in the series because, they've had a significant advantage in possession time, but they're not scoring. And I don't see Vancouver changing their style, Frank, just because they're up 2-1. They're not going to change anything.
But to your point, whether they win this series or not, I'm sorry. The Oilers aren't beating either one of those teams in Dallas or Colorado.
Yeah. Well, you worry about that then, right? Like, they're not thinking about that. That's irrelevant. It's like, can you beat Vancouver?
But I'm saying I think overall perspective matters. And that said, what do you do with Carson Soucy and the Nikita Zadorov cross checks?
Well, I don't think Zadorov is anything. Like, that's,
Well, but it's part of the sequence. It's an
sure it is.
undeniable part of the sequence.
Yeah, it's undeniable, but I don't think that, like, that one, it's, little cross checks like that happen all the time. But it's Soucy and well, I shouldn't say that Zadorov isn't, it's impactful maybe to Vancouver because he does it. I don't think Soucy, and again, this is a guess on my part because I'm not in his head. Soucy's not really a dirty player. I don't think he's looking to cross check McDavid in the face, right? I don't think that was intention, but it doesn't matter what your intention is. It matters what the end result is. And the end result is he cross-checked him the side of the face. That's the end result. Obviously there's a fine or a suspension here, but I can understand that it's after the final whistle. We saw what the NHL did in the regular season. Now, very different scenario, but after the final whistle, that Zadorov's cross-check, well, I don't think his is suspendable or anything. It might lead to his teammate getting suspended, and that would be a big blow because Soucy and Myers have played the most against the McDavid line.
Mm-hmm. I think it has to be a suspension. I think you have to take whatever the intent might be and throw
100%.
that out the window, because I think you start to play a really dangerous game of, oh, well, that player didn't necessarily intend to hit that player that way, but it's the end result that matters. If I'm driving and I don't mean to run a stop sign and I kill someone, I'm still going to jail because I ran the stop sign and I killed someone.
Yeah, it's just going to be manslaughter probably instead of murder, where it looks
Right. The punishment changes. Like, instead of being 4 games for someone for cross-checking someone in the face in the regular season, maybe it's 2 in this case, or 1. I think that's the tough part to really kind of figure out, is what one is the Department of Player Safety scale when it comes to playoff games. It used to be one playoff game equals 2 regular season game suspension, but they've acknowledged that the deeper a series goes, the deeper the playoffs are, round 2, the games are just worth more. So, like, the big question, if you wanted to ask it sort of theoretically or hypothetically, is, is this, how long would that suspension be in the regular season if it's the same thing? And the truth is, if to play devil's advocate, if Soucy cross checks him in the chest,
probably nothing.
No one, we don't know. It's probably not even a fine. No one probably even asks. It's just like, hey, this is 3 guys pushing and shoving after the game, and this is exactly what happens. Yep. But the rule book does say that if a player, like, let's just talk intent and hypothetical, a player who cleanly picks someone's head, but it happens after the victim gets shoved in the back to land at that point, the rule book does allow for that to factor in the intent. So I think this should be judged and graded irrespective of who the victim is. It can't just be because it's Connor McDavid that therefore there should be some additional punishment. But I think if you don't suspend for this cross-check, it absolutely becomes a free-for-all. And I would say more than all of that, regardless of whatever happens with the discipline, shame on the Oilers players for doing nothing to defend their captain in that situation.
Yeah, well, if you look at, they're up against the boards, like Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, like, they might not even seen it. Who knows if they actually got him in the face. But, next game, I could see it potentially. But I look at Soucy, Alex Pietrangelo last year in the playoffs in round 2. And the difference was it was in game 4, I think, where he took an axe swinging slash to the hands of Draisaitl, and way more blatant, and he got 1 game. I think if you look at that, I won't be shocked if Soucy gets nothing based on what they did last year in the second round of the playoffs. They gave a guy, which looked like an egregious play, 1 game. So I could see them, Frank, doing nothing realistically. I would think because it's a cross check to the face, it would be a game, but I won't be stunned if it's nothing, just based on what they did last year in the Pietrangelo play, which really was way worse because, as you said, like when you're swinging your stick above your shoulders, you're coming down on a guy. Like, well, what does anybody think you're trying to accomplish there? It's pretty obvious. Whereas in Soucy's case, you can make the argument that Zadorov doesn't lean into McDavid from behind, and maybe that's why and who knows, maybe it'll be, well, it's both guys on the same team, so you know what, boo-hoo. But I'm not gonna be stunned if there's no suspension here, just based on what they've done in the past.
It's definitely going to be something. I feel pretty confident in saying that.
Oh, yeah, but what's a fine? Like, a fine's nothing. Fining, meh.
So I agree, but you know, I think you have to give a 1-game suspension here.
Oh, I agree with that, but do you think they will? Is the better question.
I think it's too early to say.
Well, I'll have to make a decision, I would think, by later today for sure, because Vancouver needs time to game plan if they're going to lose one of their guys who plays, I think, big minutes.
There was some pretty heavy debate, I think, in the Department of Player Safety. I think everyone wanted to sleep on it.
Oh, sure. Quickly, Dallas and Colorado. The Avs, of course, have won game 1, where Dallas blew a 3-0 lead. Since then, the Stars have won 2 in a row. Now they're into Colorado. It's a hornet's nest. Tough place to play, but they got the win in game 3. And, I thought for long stretches really controlled that game. What do you make of that series now? And how can Colorado, do we need to see, what difference do you need to see from the Avs here in the last 2 games? Because outside of the third period in game 2, this has pretty much been Dallas really controlling the last 6 periods.
Yeah, I need to see more. It's not intensity, because the Avs always have the proper level of intensity. They haven't really controlled any game right from the start. No. And that's been the Dallas Stars. The Avs have had some great comebacks. The Avs have had really impressive moments, but having those impressive moments when you're down 3-0 or 4-0, that's just score effects. That's not your team from puck drop asserting its will. And I think that's really what's missing. It's not hard to figure, but when you look at the depth that the Avs have, not that the Stars don't, I just don't look at any line that the Avs are putting out there and say, oh, there's a weakness there. There's a spot where you can capitalize on. Like, theoretically, they should be right in the mix, right from puck drop, no matter who's going that night. And that part has been really surprising.
Yeah. It's, you know what? Their first period was better at home, I thought, but Dallas did score the first goal of the game again. It's 3 games in a row in that series, and might be as simplistic to say, but you know what? They got to find a way, I think, to play with the lead. And they've been playing catch up basically the entire series. And it's not the best way to play, even for a high octane team like the Avs. So I think the first goal tonight could be massive for Colorado. Let's bring in Tyler Yaremchuk to the pod. Ty, how you doing?
Yes, I'm ready to go with a new edition of Fill in the Blank. It is brought to you by our friends over at Wendy's and the all-new Wendy's Rewards app. Your team going all the way to the end this spring, that takes hard work and determination. You getting free food from Wendy's, all it takes is a couple clicks of your phone to download the Wendy's app, and you could be on your way to victory. And by victory, we mean free food. I'll start with one playoff one, then I'll do 2 off-season ones for you on Fill in the Blank. Simple. The team with the best chance of closing their 3-1 gap in the Eastern Conference is blank, Frank.
The Canes. Just by nature of how close the first few games were, I don't know how the answer could possibly be the Bruins. And we haven't gotten that far yet with the Avs and Stars or the Oilers and Canucks, so it has to be the Canes.
I thought the question was who has the best chance of closing it out, Ty. So if I'm wrong, I was going to. So you're saying who has the best chance to come back?
Closing the gap, yeah, was the question.
Oh, all right. Yeah, it's got to be the Hurricanes because no Brad Marchand means no chance for the Boston Bruins. But I'm going to say this. Actually, I would say neither. Neither team is coming back if we're being realistic.
Yeah, I really don't see either side doing it. Either side doing that. All right, so a couple interesting things I want to put Daily Face Off over the last bit. I thought Matt Larkin had a really good piece about the Chicago Blackhawks, their upcoming summer. Frank had Sabres GM Kevin Adams on, frankly speaking, and they talked about what could be coming this summer for the Buffalo Sabres, maybe a heightened sense of urgency there. Your question is the team that missed the playoffs that will spend the most this summer in terms of both dollars and assets. The team that missed the playoffs that will spend the most this summer is blank. Jason?
It's a really good question. Spend the most. God. Well, I guess you can say Chicago because they have the most space, but I'm gonna say
I don't think they're going to spend the most assets, though.
no. The team that I think is going to make a lot of moves. So assets might be you're bringing in as many as you can. I think the Ottawa Senators are going to make some significant changes. So I'm going to go with the Sens.
They would have also been my answer, but in the interest of saying something different, I think this is just to take Kevin Adams' own words that they're going to be aggressive this summer. They can't sit back. This is now entering year 5 of the Kevin Adams tenure. He's now on to his next head coach. This is a 13-year playoff drought. I think they've got a great back end. They've got, arguably the best young defense core in the league by a wide margin. They have some nice pieces up front with Middlestat's gone. I meant to say Tage Thompson. Alex Tuck, JJ Peterka had a great year, but the time for talk is over. It's now time to take a step forward. The youngest team in the NHL, they went 7 points backwards. The fact of the matter is this: had the Sabres just had the exact same season as they did 1 year prior, 91 points, they would have made the playoffs on the tiebreaker. So to go backwards as the youngest team in the league doesn't really make a lot of sense. They just, I don't think they can afford to sit back any longer.
Fair. All right, this one came to me when you guys were talking about the Hurricanes, and you said they could have a busy summer, maybe even similar to what the Toronto Maple Leafs had, and it kind of got me thinking, like, hey, the Canes, when they get bounced, could be a busy summer. Toronto, we know, obviously, and then you look in the West, like, what's LA going to do? What's Nashville going to do? So your next question is, of the teams eliminated from the playoffs, the one that will have the busiest summer is blank. Frank?
Busiest summer.
Which GM's not getting a vacation quickly? Yeah, making you guys think today. That's good.
The Kings would be a good answer. The Leafs are an obvious answer. I'm going to say the Winnipeg Jets.
Ooh,
They've got a couple pending free agents. Obviously, the guys that they brought in, Toffoli, Sean Monahan, but there's also Brendan Dillon and other guys on their back end that need new deals. And I think the Jets, they obviously didn't play up to the level of the Colorado Avalanche in the first round. But I don't know that we're ever going to get a playoff series again where Connor Hellebuck he allows 7 more goals than he was expected to. I think that's a complete one-off, and I'm not saying that they're an instant cup contender by any stretch of the imagination, but that team shouldn't be any worse than they were this year. But they've got some big questions to answer. And it's not just about the free agents. Like, what the heck happened to Cole Perfetti this season? Like, there's a ton of really important questions to answer.
Yeah. Greg's?
Yeah, I got to go with Toronto. Like, you got Domi and Bertuzzi, you've got Edmondson and Lybushkin, and then you got Samsonov. Marty Jones is your number 3 goaltender. Littlegrins and RFA. They got lots of guys. Nick Robertson, RFA. They got lots of guys and lots of decisions. Not to mention, are they going to make a significant change to their core? So, yeah, I will. They're obviously looking for a head coach. So I will go. It might be the easy one, but it's the obvious one. I think it's Toronto Maple Leafs. I think there's lots of reasons to say we cannot bring back something has to change. You just has to. Now the coach has changed already. We know that. We don't know who it's going to be 100%, but we know there's going to be a new head coach. So that to me is the obvious one. They're going to make some significant changes.
All right, there you go. That is a wrap on this week's edition of Fill in the Blank, brought to you by Wendy's and the Wendy's Rewards app.
Frank, outside of the playoffs, it is now almost May 15th, crazy enough. And so, the World Championships are starting, but, there's lots of guys there, but there's lots of teams that are going to start, thinking about the draft. It's coming up in Vegas, but also the coaching vacancies. And there's a few of them still that they need to be filled. Lots of coaching interviews come up. How many of these teams do you think fill out their vacancy before the end of May?
Everyone.
Yeah.
Who waits until June if you don't need to?
Yeah. Well, we've seen it before though. So,
do you find it bizarre, by the way, that we've heard absolutely nothing about the Columbus Blue Jackets and their GM search? I think it's highly alarming, and I've said this before, not to have the Blue Jackets catch any strays on this Monday, but I find it highly alarming that the guys that were responsible for hiring Mike Babcock and Jarmo Kekalainen and the last 10 years of mostly futility are the same guys that are now allowed to pick this manager moving forward. This is a $500 million to $1 billion decision that you can't afford to screw up. And show me why you think John Davidson should be the guy to pick the next GM. It makes no sense to me. He should have been removed from his position at the exact same time that Jarmo Kekalainen was. Simple as that.
It's a valid question. It's a valid question for sure. So,
but to answer your question about the coaching search and where things stand, I'd be surprised if we get to the end of the week and the Toronto Maple Leafs don't have a new head coach.
The reason I asked, Frank, is because some people you look at teams. So in 2022, Florida, President's Trophy winner, missed the playoffs. They end up making a coaching change. They hired Paul Maurice on June 22nd that year. Pete DeBoer was hired in Dallas on June 21st. John Tortorella was hired June 17th by Philly. Bruce Cassidy.
It was a different calendar. We were dealing with a later season on the back end of COVID. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, but even last year, right? If you look at guys who were hired last year, it was right at the end of May, right? Carberry and Brunette, but Greg Cronin was in June. Ryan Huska was in June. Peter Laviolette was in June. So I'm not sold they're all going to do it just based on the last 2 years.
Well, a couple of them. I'll just give you an example. In Calgary, for instance, Brad Treliving leaves. Then it takes them a while to find their next GM. It took like 3 weeks to do that GM search. And then Craig Conroy gets hired, and then he has to fill the coaching vacancy. So there are some extenuating circumstances in your calendar timeline that I don't think necessarily apply here. But the Greg Cronin one, for instance, that stands out. But I'd imagine that's going to be the same spot that the San Jose Sharks are going to be in this year, which is you have by far the least appealing of the job vacancies. You have to have everyone else work through their list first to then see who's left available, unless you just target someone that isn't necessarily high on anyone's list and you go quote unquote off the board, so to speak, to find your next coach. Just a quick update with regards to the Leafs. Craig Berube has already interviewed. He interviewed over the weekend. Todd McClellan is interviewing today, Monday, May 13th. He was spotted at LAX, flying to Toronto on Sunday. You can't avoid the internet super sleuths. And look, those two guys are going to factor and weigh in heavily. I don't think they're going to be the only two people that they talk to, but more curious than all of that to me is what exactly are the New Jersey Devils doing? They go
What about
way down the
Seattle?
track. Well, Seattle is, I think they're waiting for Dan Bilesma, but to finish his season. But
Okay.
unless I'm missing something, I don't know. I think they really like Dan Bilesma. But so the Devils go way down the track with Berube and McClellan. They don't hire either of them at this point, and then they interview Sheldon Keefe fresh off of being fired. And it's like, I'm sure those two guys were sitting there going, hey, we just had someone enter the chat in the 9th inning here. Like what gives? And so it feels like part of the process that's crippling for New Jersey is indecision. So I think it's also fair to,
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think it's also fair to ask the question about, is now the right time for Sheldon Keefe to jump back in? I don't know that there's a right answer to it, but you have a 2-year extension that didn't kick in yet. I think the Jersey job is incredibly attractive based on the pieces that they have, but if I were looking at the coaching chessboard, I would really want Sheldon Keefe to get some serious perspective on what happened in Toronto and what went wrong, as opposed to just diving into the next thing possible. It's like any dude coming off a bad breakup. Usually jumping in with the next girl is probably not the best thing that could happen to you.
No. The Winnipeg Jets are the other one, Frank. You had mentioned them, earlier in the pod about you're a team. Hey, I don't think Hellebuck, that's going to happen again. You know what? They got Morrissey. They got lots of good players there. I'm very interested on who, now some people think it's automatically going to be Arneal, and maybe, but I'm just cautious when I look at the history of assistant coaches being promoted within their organization. It's a hard gig. So I'm very curious to see what Winnipeg does.
I'd be curious to see how wide their search is. How big of a net do they cast? Because that'll tell you something about how, how much of a process or not this is to give it to someone other than Arneal.
Yeah, well, that's fair, right? But maybe, and that's why I was wondering, like maybe they're being super quiet about it, or maybe they have their mind made up and they're just going to wait to announce it. Well, we'll see. But it's that I think that job is pretty appealing to me.
Agreed.
Yeah, the Seattle one. So you think Dan Bilesma is the leader there? All right. Well,
I don't know that it's a guarantee, but it does make some sense with the success that Bilesma has had with Coachella Valley.
Yeah, no, that's true. Frankie, have yourself a great week, and we will chat with you on Thursday. That was, of course, the DFO Rundown. It's always brought to you by our partner at Bet365. If you haven't tried it yet, you should, because it is the largest sports betting global platform. You can open an account at Bet365 and use the promo code DAILY365 to bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365.